It is not because he and I are one, but because we are opposites. I take to me the services which thou hast done to him, for I and he are of such different kinds that no service which is vile can be done unto me, and none which is vile can be done unto him. C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia. There was a time before all, when the heavens' host were still one, and humanity was but a lump of unformed clay. It was then the Lord, or Allah, El, Yahweh, or whatever else you want to call it, proclaimed, "Let there be light." And there was. The darkness had spawned its own children. However, and they suffered terribly beneath the brands of the Inquisitor God. His luminescence scored the world like Greek fire and struck the foundations of existence like a battering ram. The children, the offspring of the night, fell from their heavenly mornings and plummeted to the ground like stars withered in flame. Most of the children were blackened husk by the time they struck the earth, but a few survived long enough to seek refuge. As the children fell, had split the earth, great chasm opened into lightless depths. The survivors of the fall crawled into the fractured ground. There slumber overtook them, and they were allowed time to seal them in their dirt wounds. Humanity, formed to satisfy the narcissistic God, never knew of the hollowed ground they stood upon. Ignorantly they built cities over the graves of the children, all unknowing of the power that attracted them to these places. Like flies drawn to the sweet aroma of decay, they raised their temples and altars to the heavens, even as they moved by the dark dreams of what lay buried beneath the monuments. A brand of mortals we call the first LARPers were the first living creatures to come across one of the night's offsprings. While digging a well just outside the fleeting city of Uppsala, the first tribe uncovered one of the children. It wittered and screamed beneath God's gaze, the sun, and cursed his name. Each of the beast words carried power, and the ground shook when the dying sleeper called out its true name. The beast could not save itself with words, however. Its flesh bubbled like wax and melted away, revealing bone, muscle, and burning flesh. It called out its brethren, crying for rescue and succor, but its cries went unattended. The child perished with a few minutes, its flesh clinging to the sky as poison smoke. This brief revelation, however, was enough to change the first LARPers forever. The child's words carried with them the seeds of darkness that affected those responsible for its covering, the dying beast. The first LARPers had heard the names of other children when the first one cried out, and touched by the power in those names, they could now hear the murmurs through the wind. The dark sleeper whispered to them through the moans of the dying as the first tribe learned to murder, and sang of untold power in the screams of those they raped and killed. In turn, the tribe saw the power that the dead children possessed and coveted these gifts themselves. They sought out the chaotic sleepers, whispered to them while they slumbered, and prostituted their souls to them. In exchange for sponsorship from the children, the first LARPers became their acolytes. The mortals accepted the burden of remembering their master's existence when they vanquished them from mortal memory. The first LARPers accepted the bargain in bad faith, however, believing that by knowing the true names of these malignant creatures, they would have true power over them. Such is the ignorance of the primitive people. Knowing something's true name gives it power over you as well. Power is never free for the taking or for the giving. You may have noticed that I am vague about the terms I use. I neither name the first LARPers nor their patrons. Such omission is deliberate. Such names have the power to echo across worlds and time when intoned, and there are always things listening for those names to be spoken. Even knowing those names is akin to catching a disease, a leprous affection that entropies the soul. Speaking those names spreads this contagion. The first tribe grew strong in the flesh, but withered in the spirit, as they passed the ailment onto the children and grandchildren. Worse yet, by playing with these cursed names, the first LARPers made the children more aware of the world outside of their dreams. The only thing that tethered the children to reality was their names, each time a name was called. The tether pulled the child closer to wakefulness. Eventually, the first LARPers realized that their servitude was worthless. Because of their actions, these ancient masses would awaken and stroll the world like colossi. Plagues would spread in the wake of each step, and the tribe's service would not protect them from the plagues and from the deaths and darkness. Beheartedly, the acolytes of the children did the only thing they could. They hid these accursed names within their thoughts, never to daring to speak them again, to breathe power into them, to tempt the children closer to consciousness. This act served a purpose. Barely. Deprived of a stream of sustenance, the children remained tethering on the borders between dream and waking. Fortunately, the sleepers did not know they still slept. They lived in their dreams, ruling a shadow world that existed only in their fevered imaginations. But to keep the children trapped in these fevered dreams took power. And much power had been wasted over the centuries, calling the children closer to wakefulness. To keep the children asleep, the first LARPers created giant role-playing events, live-action reenactments, cannibalistic orgies of stories and emo-ness, and wallowed in degeneration and filth, sacrificing what shreds of morality remained to them. They filled the dreams of these monsters with the sound of horrible written plot lines, badly made characters, and incredibly generic storylines, keeping them asleep with a poor LARPer's lullaby. As long as there was sufficient rapine in the monster's dream worlds, they would not stir to seek it elsewhere. The true names of these creatures still carried power, however, and the first LARPers was not blind enough to turn their backs on this magic completely. Human acolytes formed cults around the various entities and learned to dilute the names of the children, taking a root of a name and changing it. For masking it behind a foreign mortal language enables sufficient cunning priests to draw upon a fraction of the sleeping entity without rousing it. The power gained was less than it might have been, but the risk was also proportionally lessened for the priests. And for the priests, this was good enough. The strongest cult lived in the city of Uppsala, tending to the now well-hidden and well-protected remains of the first child, uncovered generations later. The well was a marvel and a terror to the people of Uppsala, but they never waned in its reverence. Over the centuries, the cult of Uppsala made constant sacrifices into the great well. When the Uppsala made war on other cities, they sacrificed non-LARPers and slaves. When they were at peace, they took livestock and children, which to make an offering. Victims were eviscerated and their blood collected in stone jars. Their organs were perfectly removed, red for augury, and tossed in the well to rest upon previously sacrificed. When no augury was needed, the cultists tore the sacrifices limb from limb with their hands and teeth, and then threw the broken bodies in the well. Come nightfall, the collected blood would be poured over the still warm corpses, and be brewing a draught of corruption and rotting flesh in which the great swarm flied and buzzed. This ritual of murder and dismemberment, however, could not go unnoticed forever. Other powers of LARPing walked the world even in those days. A new reverence was unto them. Is it any surprise then that another LARPer of great power and majesty found the well one night? The priest of the first LARPers, raised their voices against him, even using the forbidden incantations like homophobe and transphobe. But they were as wheat before the storm. The power of his voice struck them dumb and silenced their cries. His gaze struck down the weak-willed and the feeble, those who were strong in the body but not in the mind. He ripped limb from limb and tossed them to the sea. Those who were strong of mind but not of body, he ordered to rip their bodies to shreds with knives, and they did as commanded. Those who fornicated melted the flesh together and bones. He drew forth their ribs from their bodies, so each thrust was an impalement, and they watched as they died. For the LARPer had witnessed their rites and found them wanting. He had seen the rituals and wished to show them that their poor fucking design and their horrible plotlines about Methuselahs was not but children playing in the darkness. At least none, unless none remained to learn his lesson. He tossed the bodies of his playthings into their own well and let flow his criticism. 3 mortals survived to lap up the criticism he gave. The following evening, these 3 victims crawled their way out of this pit. They were filthy with gore, caked in blood, and howling with unquenched fury and madness. Their creator had abandoned them. Their patron had deserted them. They were the mad and hateful, thirsting for death. They were arrangörerna för Uppsala sabbat.